Right, thank you. We have had this discussion before, and I know the point you made then and now that this is an important and a distinct category, and under provision of student accommodation meant demands on the private rented sector. But the point I made then and now is that we have this urgency and we have this efficiency in getting student accommodation built. And I'll leave the other issues for a moment. But a student population is transient. They are in situ for maybe 7 months of the year, possibly 8. So there is another 4 months when this student accommodation is going to be available for Airbnb or whatever. So it's a major profit-making opportunity for the builder, for the developer. One of the biggest issues in terms of housing that I'm seeing is for single men. And, you know, when I'm looking at the increase in student accommodation, I don't see it bringing down the housing list. And yet we have we want the social mix. Why was there no discussion with those who have the student accommodation that there couldn't have been some number for single people, and they could go through all the Garda vetting and references and everything, but then they would have the accommodation for 12 months permanently, and that would make a difference to the housing list, not student accommodation.
Minister.
Now, again, we're trying to tackle the housing shortage in many different ways, and purpose-built student accommodation is a very successful way, because the demands of students are slightly different to the demands of a family who need accommodation all year round. And I think with some success here, and it will free up other properties from the rental sector, that if you have purpose-built student accommodation, the planning guidelines were changed and were clarified around the usage of that for the extra 3 or 4 months to make those projects viable, and that's why you see an increased delivery of student accommodation, because it's more viable to do that now. But there is also very strict conditions of what you can use those properties for those 3 or 4 months of the year as well. And the majority of cases are used for students, international students coming to avail facilities in the country over summer months as well. So in most cases it's quite well. And in fairness, I think a lot of the new student accommodation is blending in very well to communities, and rightly so, and it will free up properties. And I think we are achieving what we want to achieve here. The effect in the housing is coming down. I mean, we will see the figures in a few weeks' time of this year, and I do expect it will show it coming down. But again, it's not enough. We have to keep going here, and part of that is an increased supply of direct build student accommodation. But to be clear, it's not just private developers. There's a greater increase now of the higher education institutes delivering their own plans and their own proposals. And in front of Bord Pleanála today is over 3,500 applications. Sorry, not 3,500 applications of over 3,500 units directly by the education players themselves.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy O'Sullivan.
We did discuss before the difficulties that a preponderance of student accommodation does bring into an area, into a community, and the need to address that. On-campus accommodation is excellent because there are ways for the community to engage. With the private sector, there isn't. And that's why a suggestion had been made of some kind of regulator on student accommodation, or maybe to combine it with hostel accommodation as well. But you still haven't answered how the student accommodation is vacant for at least 4 months of the year in most cases, whereas if there had been some of those units in student accommodation given to the housing list, particularly for single men, single women, I think that would have worked, and I think that would have made a big difference to housing lists. So it's that period of the 4 months. What's going to happen that accommodation could be left idle? I doubt it, because there's too big of a profit-making opportunity there.
Minister, to conclude, please.
Again, the business case for all these purpose-built student accommodations allow for their usage over those couple of months. And yes, it's 3 or 4 months. It's actually more in some cases because we've taken the Christmas period as well. And they're used for other students coming into the country from the higher education sector as well, and other people who avail our education facilities. And yes, in some cases probably Airbnb as well. But that's what they're there for. It is monitored through the planning system. It is controlled. They bring in their applications and they're brought through in Bord Pleanála. They're brought through the local authority as well, and they have to detail their full plans for those premises. And it's not the same as providing housing for other families or for single people. This is specifically student accommodation. Their needs are a little bit different than everybody else's needs because it's specific student accommodation. It's not permanent homes. And I know you're saying we should build more homes for others. We are doing that as well. This is one section, one category. We're trying to approach this in many different ways. And again, it will free up rental properties that are more suitable for others as well. There's no doubt about that. And naturally, you've even seen the changes in the budget recently by the Minister Donoghue. We're trying to direct investment to other areas of residential accommodation as well and make that more affordable and more attractive. A lot of the issues that Minister Murphy deals with are trying to encourage investment into other forms of accommodation for other people like single men, others who need that as well. And there's activity there too. But this is specifically student accommodation. It's a key area we identified that we have to provide more student accommodation. A, they want it, but B, we also want to have it to free up other properties as well. But and again, your issues around those with the communities. I think students in most cases, and any the new accommodation has been built, there's quite good reports of their interaction with the community, and they've been asked to do that, and it has been addressed in planning applications as well.
Thank you.
How to deal with their involvement in the community.